Hey guys, welcome to ITS Tactical. On today's Knot of the Week, we are going to be tying an ocean plat mat. These were developed by sailors to protect against a bulkhead of a door slamming, or they can be used from anything from a seat cushion to a doormat, anything like that. So it's a little intimidating probably looking at it to tie one of these, but it's actually not a bad knot to tie. So let's get right into it. Alright guys, so what we have is a piece of paracord here, and I've got a smaller section of paracord that I'm going to use to demonstrate here, and followed by a longer piece that I'll actually tie the big overall ocean plat with. I just wanted to have a smaller piece here to kind of show you the intricate detail that goes into the actual weave pattern, because that's the important part to get down first. This is, like I showed in the beginning, I used a piece of climbing rope to tie this, and that's actually a great use of damaged or climbing rope that can't be in service anymore or lost its life. You can kind of put it into use as an ocean plat mat. So what we're going to do first is tie an overhand knot, and you want to kind of separate the bulk of your cordage, and I'll demonstrate that concept more once we get into the longer piece. But you want to have the bulk of your cord up towards the top when you're tying this, and a smaller section down towards the bottom, and get into that here in just a second. So the first step is obviously that overhand knot. Then what you're going to do is pull ears on that. So you're going to enlarge the pretzel shape that's in there until you're working with something that looks like this. The next step is actually twisting these like this, and this paracord is not going to want to hold that twist. So what you're going to have to do is you're actually going to have to twist that paracord here and work that twist out to get it to lay flat. Same thing on the other side. You need to hold that twist while you kind of work that section out as well. So once you have the twists in the paracord, I'm actually going to work with this a little more so it lays a little flatter. Once you have those twists, you're going to stack them. So the top is going to come to the bottom, just like so. And you can already kind of start to see a pattern emerge with this. But the next step is actually going to take the top line, and you're going to come underneath. So if I was looking at this in terms of loop, I've got a top bite or loop and a bottom bite and loop. So this cordage, which came from the top here, is going to get weaved underneath the complete bite of the bottom. So just like so. So if you look at it, it's actually passing underneath that bite and on the top of the top bite. So I'm going to pull that through. So now we're looking at a pattern that looks like this. And I'm going to be continually kind of straightening this out as we go, just to make sure it looks right. Alright, so you should wind up with something that looks pretty much like that. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take the other line, which has been your standing part, and you're going to start tracing this way. So I'm actually going to go, make sure I've got this right here. Alright, so I'm going to go underneath this line here. Sorry, underneath this line. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to lock that bite in so it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm going to come underneath here, and now I'm going to come on top of this, and then on top of that, so you can start to see what's going on right now. And now I'm going to actually go underneath that one too. So I'm going to pull that through just like so. And that gives us the pattern there. All right, so now you should wind up with something that looks like this. And at this point, what you're going to be left with is the bulk of your cordage is going to be now at the bottom, if that kind of makes sense from what I was saying earlier about how we started with the bulk of the cordage up here. and then the smaller piece is going to be left up here. And the reason that's important is because that longer piece is going to start to trace the entire pattern as many times as you're going to want to wrap through. So the bulk of your cordage needs to be down here so that you can feed that through. So I'm going to go through the first wrap here with this demo paracord, and then what we'll do is we'll start to wrap with the actual length we're going to be using for this too. So I'm going to start to trace right where this left off, but I'm going to come on the inside of this. So this is actually going to come inside, and it's going to trace exactly the same way that that came from. So you can start to see that pattern emerge. And what's really important here is that it's on the inside of that line. That's very important. And you're going to continue to wrap on the inside. So I'm going to keep tracing this around. It's just going to follow the pattern here. Just like so. Actually, I missed one there. I actually don't have enough, it looks like, to continue the trace, so at this point I'm actually going to pull some more through here just because I misjudged a little bit. And when you're doing this with, and you'll see that with the larger section, there's not going to be a question of not having enough because you're going to be working with that entire length and you'll be pulling that entire length through. So again, I'm just making sure that I precisely follow where that last line went, always staying to the inside. And this is the most important wrap because this kind of dictates how everything else is set up after this too. And this is just one of those patterns that takes a while, unfortunately. So you can imagine doing this like we're going to in a second with a lot of rope, a lot of 550. It's just going to take some time. Okay, we're almost through with the pattern here. The last couple of wraps. I'm just going to clean this up so we can see the pattern emerge here. All right, so you can start to see what's going on here. Our working line now, which would be considerably longer at this point, is actually going to continue around, and it's going to go back through again right here. Oh, sorry, right here. I got mixed up there. And continue following that pattern. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut, and I'm going to move to the larger strand, and we'll get it set up about in this location with the larger stuff, and then I'll show you kind of how to complete that. So cut away and be right back. Okay guys, so now you can see that we have got our ocean plate pretty much finished up. And I'm not going to lie, this took about an hour and a half probably from start to finish to work on this bigger section. As you can see, this was our starting point here, this smaller mat. So as we were talking about earlier, you start to loop inside of here when you're making those consecutive loops, and then what you're left with is that smaller section up towards the top there. So as you look at this larger one, you can see that now we're left with that section up towards the top, and then it terminated right here, or this is the point at which we would start to go back through and make another pass. So to give you a general idea, this was about 80 feet or so, and what we wound up with is roughly a 14-foot wide ocean plat mat by about 7 to 7.5 inches tall or something like that. So, and there is actually 8 different wraps within this. So if you were to count the number of paracord strands at any increment along this weave pattern, you would count 8. So that's what we're going to do when we terminate this, is we're going to line this up correctly when we cut and fuse this, as to when you flip this over, you'll be able to count those 8 strands at every point. So back to what I was mentioning just a second ago, that roughly means that for every pass that we made along these 8 strands using 80 feet, you got about 10 feet per wrap. So just wanted to give you an idea of that. So how we're going to terminate this again is we're going to take this inner strand here, which is going to be kind of our longer leftover. And just a little tip here, you want to make sure that before you start one of these wraps that you've got enough cordage to complete the wrap. And I know that's a little hard to estimate sometimes, but you don't want to get, halfway through there and, wind up having to come back out with it before you terminate it. So to get our 8, what we're going to do is we're going to cut this right here, which if I was to count across this grid here, that would give us 6, 7, 8 there. But up here, you've only got 7, so we're going to pull this strand around to approximately this location here before we cut and fuse. And if we fuse these 2 pieces together right here, when we flip this thing over, that's going to give us 8 at every point, which is what we want. So I'm going to do this here. I'm going to go ahead and cut this at this point. And you want to make sure before you do this that everything's tightened up and it's exactly how you want it, because you're only going to get one shot at this basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this has got a good melt on here, and I'm going to actually just fuse it to itself there. So I'm just pressing it into the other paracord. So along with this last piece here, I'm going to make sure this lines up correctly and cut somewhere in here. And again, make sure this melts quite a bit here. If we're fusing it down. All right, so now we've got that fused in, and all we should have to do is flip this over, which you have to be a little bit careful with this. And that's one thing I wanted to mention, that this paracord, it looks cool, but at the same rate, you're going to have to kind of flatten it out, make sure it gets lined up nicely every time you go to move it. I think that if I had probably an extra 20 feet or so if I had started with 100 feet, I probably would have been able to get it through another 2 wraps to where I wouldn't be seeing any daylight through this stuff. So that's just something to take into account. It's really hard to estimate, based on width, I need X amount of paracord to start, because you really never know how this starting pattern is going to wind up in the beginning as far as width-wise. So it's kind of really hard to estimate this, at least in my experience. I haven't made too many of these things, but that's just a little nugget of knowledge there that I wanted to share. So again, this is the ocean plat mat and how to finish it off. Hope you enjoyed this Knot of the Week, and let us know if you have any questions, and check itstactical.com for further information on how to make your own ocean plat. Thanks for watching.